The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Davidson's training grounds as Master Chief Sarah Chen stepped off the military transport bus. At 42 years old, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her uniform was crisp but unremarkable. She preferred it that way. Fort Davidson sat just outside the small town of Pineville, North Carolina. It was a training facility for special operations candidates, and Sarah had been assigned here as the new hand-to-hand combat instructor. After 20 years in naval special warfare, including 12 as a SEAL, she'd requested a quieter posting. Her knees weren't what they used to be, and the sleepless nights from too many missions had started to catch up with her. But quiet wasn't what she found. As Sarah walked toward the administration building, she noticed a group of young soldiers near the obstacle course. They were supposed to be training, but instead they were laughing and shoving each other like teenagers at recess. Their instructor, a stocky sergeant named Miller, was nowhere to be seen. "Can I help you, ma'am?" A voice behind her made Sarah turn. It was Lieutenant Parker, a man in his early 30s with perfectly styled hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. She'd read his file on the bus. He was the assistant director of training, and he'd been at Fort Davidson for 3 years. "Master Chief Sarah Chen, reporting for duty," she said, extending her hand. Parker's handshake was limp. "Ah, yes, the new instructor. We weren't expecting someone so seasoned." Sarah caught the implication, but let it slide. "I'm looking forward to working with the candidates." "Of course," Parker glanced at his watch. "Though I should mention, we've always had male instructors for the advanced combat courses. The candidates respond better to a certain physical presence." "I see." Sarah's expression remained neutral. "I'll be sure to bring my physical presence to class tomorrow morning." Parker's smile tightened. "I'm sure you'll do your best. Let me show you to your quarters." The housing unit was basic but clean. As Sarah unpacked her few belongings, she thought about Parker's words. She'd heard it all before. In the early 2000s, when she'd first tried to join the SEALs, the pushback had been brutal. But she'd made it through Bud S training, survived Hell Week, and earned her trident. She'd served in Afghanistan and Iraq, led teams on classified missions, and trained with the best warriors in the world. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone anymore, but she had a feeling Fort Davidson was going to test her anyway. That evening, Sarah walked into the base dining facility. The room fell into an uncomfortable near silence as soldiers noticed her. She filled her tray and looked for a seat. Every table seemed to suddenly have no room, or the soldiers there found urgent reasons to be looking elsewhere. Finally, she sat alone at a small table near the window. "You're the new instructor?" A young woman in fatigues approached. She looked about 25, with honest eyes and a nervous smile. "I'm Private First Class Amy Rodriguez. I work in communications, but I've heard about you." "All good things, I hope," Sarah said, gesturing for Amy to sit. Amy glanced around nervously before sitting. "Some of the guys are. They're saying you got this position because of politics, that the Navy needed to look good by promoting women." Sarah took a bite of her food. "And what do you think?" "I think anyone who made it through SEAL training has earned their place," Amy said quietly. "I just wanted you to know that not everyone here is like Lieutenant Parker and his crew." "His crew?" Amy lowered her voice. "Parker runs this place like his own kingdom. He's got a group of guys who do whatever he says. Sergeant Miller, Corporal Davis, a few others. They make life difficult for anyone who doesn't fit their idea of a soldier." "And let me guess," Sarah said, "women don't fit that idea." "Or anyone who challenges them." Amy stood up. "I should go, but be careful, Master Chief. They don't like change." After Amy left, Sarah finished her meal in silence. Through the window, she could see the training grounds, empty now in the gathering darkness. She'd faced enemy combatants in some of the world's most dangerous places. She'd survived situations that would break most people. A few insecure men at a stateside training base didn't scare her. But as she walked back to her quarters, she noticed Parker standing outside the officers' club with 3 other men. They were watching her, and their laughter carried across the quiet evening air. Sarah kept walking, her head high. Tomorrow she would meet her first class of candidates. Tomorrow she would show them what a SEAL combat master could do. She just didn't know, yet, how hard they were going to make her prove it. As she lay in bed that night, Sarah thought about her daughter, Maya, who was starting college in California. Maya had been so proud when Sarah told her about the instructor position. "Finally, a safe job," she'd said. Sarah had laughed at the time. Now, staring at the ceiling, Sarah had a feeling that Fort Davidson might be more dangerous than any combat zone she'd ever seen, just in different ways. The training hall was already full when Sarah arrived at 0600. 30 candidates sat in rows of chairs, all men, all watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. Lieutenant Parker stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, a smirk on his face. Sarah walked to the front and set down her training bag. She didn't introduce herself right away. Instead, she pulled out a worn pair of training gloves and began wrapping her hands, taking her time, letting the silence build. "My name is Master Chief Sarah Chen," she finally said. "For the next 8 weeks, I'll be teaching you advanced hand-to-hand combat. Some of you will learn, some of you won't. Either way, you'll all try." A hand shot up in the back row. It was a large candidate with a thick neck and a cocky grin. "Ma'am, with all due respect, how are you going to teach us combat techniques when most of us are twice your size?" "Good question," Sarah pointed at him. "What's your name?" "Corporal Davis, ma'am." "Corporal Davis, why don't you come up here and demonstrate your concern?" The room erupted in low whistles and mutters. Davis stood up, clearly pleased with himself. He was at least 6'3" and probably weighed 240 pounds. As he walked to the front, he rolled his shoulders and cracked his knuckles. Sarah waited in the center of the mat, relaxed, hands at her sides. "Okay, Corporal," she said. "Come at me like you mean it. Don't hold back because I'm a woman, that would be disrespectful." Davis grinned. "Yes, ma'am." He rushed forward, relying on his size and strength. It was exactly what Sarah expected. She sidestepped, used his own momentum against him, and had him face down on the mat in less than 3 seconds. Her knee was pressed between his shoulder blades, his arm locked at an angle that would break if he struggled. "Lesson 1, Sarah said calmly. "Size doesn't matter if you don't know how to use it. Technique beats strength every time." She released Davis, who stood up red-faced and angry. The room was dead silent now. "Anyone else have questions?" Sarah asked. No one raised their hand. For the next 2 hours, Sarah ran them through basic techniques. She demonstrated each move herself, then watched as they practiced. She corrected stances, adjusted grips, and pushed them harder than they expected. By the end of the session, they were all sweating and breathing hard. "Tomorrow, 0600, Sarah said. "Don't be late." As the candidates filed out, Sarah noticed Parker talking to Davis near the door. Their eyes were on her, and neither looked pleased. The next few days followed the same pattern. Sarah taught, the candidates learned, and Parker's group grew more hostile. They started small. Her training equipment would go missing. Her lesson plans, left in the office, would be rearranged. During sessions, Davis and his friends would whisper just loud enough for her to hear. Sarah ignored it all. She dealt with worse. But on Friday, things escalated. Sarah was demonstrating a defensive technique when Davis volunteered to be her partner. She should have seen it coming. As they moved through the sequence, Davis suddenly broke form and grabbed her roughly, using far more force than necessary. "Oops," he said loudly. "Sorry, ma'am, I forgot my own strength." Sarah's ribs ached where he'd gripped her, but she didn't show it. "No problem, Corporal. Let's go again." This time, when Davis tried to grab her, Sarah executed a perfect counter. She swept his legs, controlled his fall, and put him in a submission hold that had him tapping the mat frantically within seconds. "Remember, Corporal," she said quietly just for him, "I'm a SEAL combat master. I've fought people who actually wanted to kill me. You're just annoying." She released him and stood up. Class dismissed. That afternoon, Sarah was called to the base commander's office. Colonel Warren was a career officer in his late 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes. Parker was already there, standing at attention. "Master Chief Chen," the colonel said, "I've received a complaint." Sarah remained standing. "Sir." "Corporal Davis claims you used excessive force during training. He says you deliberately injured him to prove a point." Sarah's jaw tightened. "That's not accurate, sir. Corporal Davis volunteered for a demonstration. I used appropriate technique. He's not injured." "Nevertheless," Parker interjected, "we need to be careful. If a student feels unsafe with an instructor—" "Lieutenant," the colonel interrupted, "I wasn't speaking to you." Parker's face flushed, but he fell silent. Colonel Warren looked at Sarah for a long moment. "Master Chief, I've read your file. Your record is exceptional. But this is a different environment than combat operations. These are trainees, not enemy combatants." "I understand, sir. I treat them appropriately." "See that you do." The colonel dismissed them both. In the hallway outside, Parker caught up with Sarah. "You should know when you're not wanted," he said quietly. "This base doesn't need your kind of diversity hire." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. "My kind. I earned my trident through blood and sweat. I've served in places you've only read about in briefings. What have you earned, Lieutenant? Besides the right to bully people from behind a desk." Parker's face went red. "You'll regret that." "Add it to the list," Sarah said and walked away. That night, Sarah sat in her quarters and finally let herself feel the exhaustion. Her ribs were bruised. Her patience was wearing thin, and she was tired of fighting battles that shouldn't need to be fought. But giving up wasn't in her nature. It never had been. The harassment intensified over the following weeks. Sarah would arrive at the training hall to find offensive messages scrawled on the whiteboard. Her personal locker in the gym was broken into, her workout clothes scattered across the floor. During her classes, Parker started showing up more often, interrupting her instruction with helpful suggestions that were clearly meant to undermine her authority. Through it all, Sarah maintained her composure. She taught her classes with precision and professionalism. Some of the candidates were actually learning. She could see it in the way they moved, the way they thought through problems instead of just relying on strength. But Davis and his crew made every session difficult. They would deliberately perform techniques wrong, then claim they didn't understand her instructions. They'd arrive late and leave early, and they spread rumors throughout the base that Sarah couldn't control her classroom. Amy Rodriguez became Sarah's only real friend on the base. They'd meet for coffee in town on weekends, away from the watchful eyes of Fort Davidson. "It's not right what they're doing to you," Amy said one Saturday morning at a small diner in Pineville. "Everyone knows it, but nobody wants to stand up to Parker." "Why does he have so much power?" Sarah asked. Amy stirred her coffee slowly. "His uncle is a 2-star general at the Pentagon. Parker's been untouchable since he got here. Anyone who crosses him gets transferred or suddenly fails their performance reviews." "The colonel must know." "Colonel Warren is 6 months from retirement. I think he just wants to keep things quiet until he can leave." Amy looked up. "But you're different. You're not afraid of Parker." "I've faced scarier things than him," Sarah said. "I believe that, but Sarah, maybe you should request a transfer. This isn't worth what they're putting you through." Sarah shook her head. "I don't run, not from men who think rank and connections make them better than everyone else." The following Monday, everything came to a head. Sarah was running her class through sparring exercises when Parker entered with Sergeant Miller and 2 other officers she didn't recognize. They wore MP armbands, military police. "Master Chief Chen," Parker said loudly, "these officers need to speak with you." Sarah's student stopped training, sensing trouble. "Can this wait until after class, Lieutenant?" Sarah asked calmly. "I'm afraid not. There's been another complaint, a serious one." One of the MPs stepped forward. "Master Chief Chen, you're being accused of striking a subordinate outside of training. We need you to come with us." Sarah's mind raced. "Who am I accused of striking?" "Me, ma'am." Davis stepped forward from the back of the room. His eye was blackened, his lips split. Friday night, outside the enlisted club, you said I needed to learn respect. It was a lie. Sarah had been in her quarters Friday night, video chatting with her daughter. She had an alibi, but looking at Parker's satisfied smile, she realized this had been planned carefully. That didn't happen, Sarah said firmly. We have witnesses, Parker said. 3 soldiers saw the altercation. Then they're lying. I was in my quarters all evening. Can anyone verify that? The MP asked. Sarah hesitated. She'd been alone except for the video call with Maya, and they'd know that wasn't enough. It was her word against Davis and whoever Parker had convinced to lie for him. I need to make a phone call, Sarah said. You can do that at the MP station, the officer replied. Right now, you need to come with us. As they let her out, Sarah saw the faces of her students. Some looked shocked. A few looked smug. But one young candidate named Private Jackson caught her eye. He looked angry, like he wanted to say something but didn't dare. At the MP station, Sarah was questioned for 2 hours. The same questions over and over. Where were you Friday night? Why would Davis lie? Have you had conflicts with him before? Sarah answered honestly, calmly, even as her anger built beneath the surface. This was a setup, and everyone knew it. But in the military, accusations had to be investigated, and Parker had made sure the accusations would stick. Finally, Colonel Warren arrived. He looked older than usual, tired. Master Chief, you're suspended from teaching duties pending investigation. You're confined to base. Sir, I didn't do this. I believe you, Warren said quietly. But my hands are tied. There are witnesses. There's an injured soldier. I have to follow protocol. This is exactly what Lieutenant Parker wants, Sarah said. Warren's jaw tightened. I'm aware of the politics at play here, Master Chief, but I can't make this go away just because I don't like it. Give me time to investigate properly. And in the meantime, Parker wins. In the meantime, you follow orders. Warren's voice was firm. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. Sarah was escorted back to her quarters. As she walked across the base, soldiers stared. Word had already spread. The new instructor had been suspended for assaulting a student. Her reputation, built over 20 years of service, was being destroyed in a single day. That night, Sarah sat on her bunk and allowed herself a moment of doubt. Maybe Amy was right. Maybe she should request a transfer, leave Fort Davidson behind, and find somewhere she could teach in peace. But then she thought about all the young soldiers like Amy and Jackson, the ones who wanted to learn from someone who'd actually been in combat. She thought about every woman who would come after her, facing the same prejudice and obstacles. And she thought about the men who'd fought beside her in the SEALs, who'd trusted her with their lives and never once questioned whether she belonged. No, she wouldn't run, but she also couldn't fight this battle the same way she'd fought the others. She needed evidence. She needed proof of what Parker was doing, and she needed allies willing to speak the truth. Sarah pulled out her phone and started making calls. The investigation dragged on for 2 weeks. Sarah remained confined to base, suspended from her teaching duties. She spent her days in her quarters or at the base gym, where she worked out alone, burning off frustration with each rep and each mile on the treadmill. But she wasn't idle. Amy proved to be more resourceful than Sarah had imagined. As a communications specialist, Amy had access to base records, schedules, and security footage. She couldn't access everything without raising suspicion, but she could point Sarah in the right direction. The enlisted club has security cameras, Amy said during one of their carefully arranged meetings in the base library. If you weren't there Friday night, the footage will prove it. Parker's probably already thought of that, Sarah replied. He wouldn't set this up without covering that angle. Maybe, but I checked the logs. The camera footage from that night was requested by Lieutenant Parker on Monday morning, before the MPs even contacted you. Sarah leaned forward, so he either erased it or edited it. Or he knows it shows the truth and he's keeping it away from the investigation. Amy slid a piece of paper across the table. This is the name of the civilian contractor who maintains the security system. He's ex-Army. might be sympathetic to your situation. Sarah pocketed the paper. You're taking a big risk helping me. You're not the only one who's tired of how things work around here, Amy said quietly. Besides, this is bigger than just you now. If Parker can do this to a decorated SEAL, he can do it to anyone. Sarah's second ally came from an unexpected source. Private Jackson, the young candidate who'd looked so angry when she was led away, knocked on her door late one evening. Master Chief, can I talk to you? He asked, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Sarah let him in. You shouldn't be here, Private. You'll get yourself in trouble. I'm already in trouble, ma'am. Jackson was 23, from a small town in Georgia. He had the lean build of a runner and eyes that didn't match his age. I saw what happened Friday night at the enlisted club. Sarah's heart rate increased. What did you see? Davis getting into a fight with another soldier, some guy from a different unit. The other guy gave Davis that black eye. But then Davis saw me watching, and he told me if I said anything to anyone, I'd fail out of training. Jackson met her eyes. I'm here because I didn't join the army to watch good people get set up. Are you willing to give a statement? Yes, ma'am, but I need your help with something first. Sarah waited. My sister is in an army hospital in Virginia. She was deployed to Syria and came back with PTSD. She's not doing well, and I'm trying to get emergency leave to see her. I put in the request 3 weeks ago, but Lieutenant Parker denied it. Said training comes first. Sarah felt her anger toward Parker deepen. I'll see what I can do, but Jackson, if you come forward, Parker will retaliate. Let him try, ma'am. Some things are more important than making Lieutenant Parker happy. The third piece fell into place when Sarah contacted the civilian contractor, a man named Bobby Hutchins. They met at a roadside diner outside of Pineville, far from the base. Bobby was in his 60s, with weathered hands and a calm demeanor. He listened as Sarah explained her situation. I remember that night, Bobby said when she finished. Parker called me personally, said there'd been an incident and he needed the footage secured for an investigation. Told me not to let anyone else access it. Did you watch it? Sarah asked. I did, curious, you know. Bobby took a sip of coffee. You weren't anywhere in that footage, Master Chief. Davis got into it with another soldier, just like the private said. The whole thing's on camera. Why hasn't that come out in the investigation? Because Parker told the MPs the cameras were malfunctioning that night, said the footage was corrupted. Bobby's expression hardened. I've been doing security systems for 30 years. Those cameras work fine. I've got the original footage backed up on my personal drives just in case something like this happened. Sarah felt hope for the first time in weeks. Would you be willing to provide that footage to the proper authorities? I'd be happy to, but here's the thing. If I go directly to the base, Parker will find a way to discredit it or discredit me. We need to go higher up the chain. How high? I've got a friend who works at the Inspector General's office at Fort Bragg. If we can get the evidence to him, along with statements from witnesses, he'll open a formal investigation that Parker can't interfere with. Sarah nodded slowly. This could work, but they needed more than just the footage and Jackson's statement. They needed to show a pattern of behavior, proof that this wasn't an isolated incident. Over the next week, Sarah and Amy worked carefully. Amy discreetly interviewed other soldiers on base, finding 3 more people willing to talk about Parker's abuse of power. One was a female supply sergeant who'd been forced to transfer after rejecting Parker's advances. Another was a Latino officer who'd been passed over for promotion repeatedly despite excellent performance reviews. The third was a junior instructor who'd witnessed Parker falsifying training reports. Each person had been too afraid to come forward alone, but together, their stories painted a clear picture. Sarah also reached out to her old SEAL commander, now retired Admiral Richardson. He'd been the one who'd recommended her for the instructor position at Fort Davidson. Sarah, I'm sorry this happened, Richardson said over the phone. I thought this would be a good fit for you. It's not your fault, sir, but I need your help. I need someone with credibility to review this evidence and take it to the right people. Send me everything you have. I still have friends in high places. By the end of the second week, they had built a comprehensive case. Video footage proving Davis lied. Witness statements showing a pattern of harassment and abuse of power. Documentation of Parker's interference with the investigation. But before Sarah could deliver it to the Inspector General, Colonel Warren called her to his office. "Master Chief, I have an update on your case," he said. He looked even more tired than before. "The investigation has concluded. Due to insufficient evidence, the charges are being dropped." Sarah should have felt relieved, but Warren's expression told her there was more. "However," he continued, "in light of the disruption this incident has caused, and for the good of the unit, I'm recommending you accept a transfer to another base, effective immediately." "Sir, that's exactly what Parker wants." "I know," Warren's voice was heavy. "But I can't protect you here, Sarah. Parker's uncle has made phone calls. There's pressure coming from the Pentagon. If you stay, they'll find another reason to come after you." Sarah stood. "With respect, sir, I'm not leaving, not until this is made right." "That's not a request, Master Chief. It's an order." Sarah looked at the colonel, a good man trapped in an impossible situation, just months from retirement, unwilling to risk everything for one instructor. "Then I'll need to go over your head, sir," she said quietly. Warren's eyes widened slightly. "Sarah, I have evidence of criminal misconduct by Lieutenant Parker. I have witness statements and video footage. And I have friends at the Inspector General's office who are very interested in what's been happening at Fort Davidson." The colonel was silent for a long moment. "You're sure about this? Once you start this, there's no going back." "I'm sure, sir." Warren nodded slowly. "Then I suggest you move quickly, because if Parker finds out what you're doing, he'll try to stop you." Sarah knew she had to act fast. That evening, she met with Bobby Hutchins and Admiral Richardson at a hotel in Raleigh, 2 hours from Fort Davidson. They reviewed all the evidence one final time before Richardson made a secure call to his contact at the Inspector General's office. "They'll send a team tomorrow," Richardson told Sarah after hanging up. "They'll interview everyone, review the footage, and launch a full investigation. Parker won't be able to interfere with this one." "Thank you, sir," Sarah said. "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah thought about her daughter, about the young soldiers like Amy and Jackson who deserved better, about every person who'd ever been pushed down by someone with power and connections. "I've been prepared for this my whole career," she said. But Parker found out sooner than expected. The next morning, Sarah was running on the track when 2 MPs approached her. Behind them stood Parker, and his expression was cold. "Master Chief Chen, you're under arrest for unauthorized release of classified information," one of the MPs said. Sarah's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Parker stepped forward. "Someone accessed the base security system without authorization and copied classified surveillance footage. The IP address traces back to your quarters." It was another setup. Parker must have planted evidence on her computer. Sarah realized with sick certainty that he had someone in the IT department helping him. "I didn't access anything," Sarah said. "We'll let the investigators determine that," Parker replied smoothly. "Take her." As the MPs moved to handcuff her, a voice rang out across the training grounds. "Stop right there." Colonel Warren was striding toward them, and he wasn't alone. Behind him walked a woman in civilian clothes with a briefcase and 2 men in suits with credentials hanging from their necks. "Colonel," Parker said, clearly caught off guard. "What's going on?" "Lieutenant Parker, this is Agent Morrison from the Inspector General's office, along with representatives from Army Criminal Investigation Command. They're here to investigate allegations of misconduct, abuse of power, and obstruction of justice." Parker's face went pale. "Sir, I don't know what you've been told, but—" "But nothing, Lieutenant. You're relieved of duty effective immediately, pending investigation. The same goes for Corporal Davis, Sergeant Miller, and anyone else involved in the conspiracy against Master Chief Chen." "This is ridiculous. My Uncle Will." Your uncle has been notified, Agent Morrison interrupted, and he's recused himself from anything involving this matter. Now, Lieutenant, you can either cooperate with our investigation or you can make things much worse for yourself. Sarah watched as Parker's arrogance crumbled. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked scared. Release the Master Chief, Warren ordered the MPs. They quickly removed the handcuffs. Over the next 3 days, the investigators tore through Fort Davidson like a tornado. They interviewed dozens of soldiers. They reviewed years of records, and they uncovered a pattern of abuse that went far beyond Sarah's case. Parker had been falsifying training records, accepting bribes from soldiers who wanted easier assignments, and sexually harassing multiple female personnel. Davis and Miller had been his enforcers, intimidating anyone who threatened to speak up. The evidence Sarah and her allies had gathered became the foundation of a case that would eventually lead to court-martial proceedings for Parker and criminal charges for several others. But it was Private Jackson's testimony that proved most damaging. He'd secretly recorded conversations with Davis where Davis bragged about setting up Sarah and discussed other soldiers they'd run off the base. I started recording everything after they threatened me, Jackson told Sarah later. Figured if they were going to ruin my career, I'd at least have proof of what they did. That took courage, Sarah said. I learned from the best, Master Chief. 2 weeks after the investigation began, Sarah stood in front of her class again. Many of the same faces looked back at her, but the atmosphere was completely different. Welcome back, she said simply. Let's get to work. The training session that followed was intense but respectful. The candidates pushed themselves harder than before, and Sarah saw real progress. Davis was gone, court-martialed and dishonorably discharged. His friends had either been transferred or were facing their own disciplinary actions. After class, a group of soldiers approached Sarah. They drafted a letter apologizing for not speaking up sooner and thanking her for having the courage to fight back. We should have stood with you from the beginning, one of them said. You're standing now, Sarah replied. That's what matters. Amy Rodriguez was promoted and given a commendation for her role in exposing the corruption. Private Jackson received his emergency leave and returned 2 weeks later with renewed focus. His sister was improving, and he credited Sarah with giving him the courage to fight for what mattered. Colonel Warren announced his retirement on schedule, but he did so with his reputation intact. In his final base address, he spoke about integrity and moral courage. Sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks, he said, looking directly at Sarah. Master Chief Chen reminded us all what that looks like. 3 months later, Sarah received a call from the Navy Personnel Command. The Secretary of the Navy wanted to recognize her service with a commendation for valor in the face of adversity. You don't have to accept, the caller said. Some people prefer to let these things fade away quietly. Sarah thought about it. Part of her wanted exactly that, to fade into quiet competence, teach her classes, and avoid the spotlight. But another part of her knew that recognition mattered. Not for her, but for every person who'd face similar challenges in the future. I'll accept, she said, but only if Private Jackson and Amy Rodriguez receive recognition too. I'll see what I can do. The ceremony was held at Fort Davidson, and soldiers from across the base attended. Sarah stood at attention as a Navy admiral pinned the medal to her uniform. In the audience, she saw her daughter Maya, who'd flown across the country to be there. Amy stood in dress uniform, beaming. Jackson stood with his sister, who looked healthier than in the photos he'd shown Sarah. Master Chief Chen, the admiral said, your service exemplifies the highest traditions of the United States military. Your courage, both in combat and in standing up for what's right, serves as an inspiration to us all. The applause was thunderous. Later at the reception, an older general approached Sarah. She recognized him from photos. It was Parker's uncle, the 2-star general. Master Chief, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. My nephew deceived me about what was happening here. When I learned the truth, I was ashamed. Sarah studied him carefully. Sir, respect isn't inherited, it's earned. Your nephew forgot that. He did, and he's paying the price. The general extended his hand. For what it's worth, the army is better for having people like you serving. Sarah shook his hand. Thank you, sir. As the reception wound down, Sarah found herself standing outside on the training grounds, looking at the obstacle course in the fading light. Colonel Warren's replacement, a no-nonsense woman named Colonel Martinez, joined her. Thinking about your next challenge? Martinez asked. Always, Sarah replied. That's what keeps us sharp. I've reviewed your training program. Your candidates are showing remarkable improvement. I'd like you to expand it, train more instructors in your methods. Sarah smiled. I'd like that. Good, because this base needs more people who remember what we're really here for, making better soldiers, not playing politics. That evening, Sarah video called Maya. Mom, I'm so proud of you, her daughter said, tears in her eyes. You could have walked away, but you didn't. Walking away isn't in my nature, sweetheart. You know that. I know, that's what makes you who you are. Maya paused. So what's next? Sarah thought about the young soldiers she'd be training, about the changes happening at Fort Davidson, about all the challenges still ahead. Next, I keep doing what I've always done. I serve with honor, I teach with integrity, and I never forget who I am. And who's that? Sarah smiled at her daughter through the screen. A SEAL combat master who earned every step of her journey. That's something no one can ever take away. As she ended the call and prepared for another early morning, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not because the fight was over. There would always be more battles, more challenges, more people who underestimated her. But she'd proven, once again, that strength wasn't just about physical power or rank or connections. It was about standing up when it would be easier to back down. It was about truth in the face of lies. And it was about remembering that real power came from integrity, courage, and the willingness to fight for what's right.